Hey everyone, Captain Foley and Samuel Calkins are here again,
Hi guys.
welcoming you back to Trekyards. Today we're looking at the Vulcan Surrok class, first seen in the Enterprise Season 1, and we have with us Mr. Doug Drexler, who designed this ship for Enterprise.
I'll never forget it.
So we will be getting the inside scoop on this Vulcan starship from the man himself.
Sorry,
So let's begin.
sorry, I was playing
Cool.
got the model. Anyway, okay, so let's start out.
Listen, you're being too silly. You better cut it out.
Sorry, Doug.
I
He's getting
agree.
carried away, Stuart.
It's time to work now, Samuel. Playtime was 2 minutes ago.
You
Okay.
know, it was like when Patrick Stewart was on TNG in the early years. He was very stodgy and stuffy. And then he like totally lost it after hanging around with the crazy people for a couple of years. He was just as silly as they were.
Cool.
That's what's happening to you, Samuel. After one episode, you're already becoming sillier. Okay, I know we're supposed to talk about the ship.
Okay, so this ship is obviously a Vulcan ship operated by the Vulcan High Command in the 22nd century, so Enterprise era. But it shouldn't be confused by the Surrok class warp sled, which we saw in the motion picture. It's the ship that brought Spock to the Enterprise. But we'll be doing that ship separately, so you'll see it at some point.
As mentioned, this is the Surrok class ship. The first one we ever saw was called the Tamur from the episode Breaking the Ice, which took place in the year 2151. It has a length of 350 meters with a top speed of warp 7. An idea for scale, the Constitution class is 289 meters long, and the later Intrepid class was 344 meters. Still, it was a large ship for the era, with the Klingon D5 or D4 and D5 being around 250 meters, and the NX-01 at 225 meters.
So definitely a big ship. So Doug, I mean, how did you approach the scale of the ship, especially compared to the NX-01?
Well, you could figure out the scale by the size of the decks by looking at the windows. And that's your human scale there. Although those windows that we see on the pylon are, I mean, usually a deck is about 11 feet or so. It's kind of like an apartment building. But I would say that these were double the size of an Enterprise deck. They're more like 22 feet. Pretty roomy. And the other thing is that I don't see the ship as being super populated either. You know, Vulcans appreciate their solitude, you know. And I look at it and I can't imagine that there would be more than 150 to 200 people on board.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
But that's just me,
Well,
just the way I perceive the Vulcans.
Yeah.
Which actually I perceive them differently than we saw them on Enterprise, frankly.
Yeah, so did I, actually. So did my brother, who's a big Vulcan fan.
Well, you know, the Vulcans were cranky, you know, sons of bitches, you know, and they were like the relative that wouldn't, you know, they come for a visit and they don't leave.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't share
And
technology as well. How? Ugh.
Yeah.
We get into that later, too, though.
Yeah. The Vulcans really bothered me. They had a sense of, you know, an air of superiority about them.
Which isn't
and
logical.
I found, yeah, it is. I just found them to be very annoying. I would have done it a totally different way.
So when you were designing the original ship, what made you make the ship so large? Because what made you think a Vulcan science ship or even warship should be that large? Wouldn't the Vulcans maybe they were a small race? Why did they build so big?
Well, I mean, the larger the ship, the greater the, you know, mission envelope. You know, because you've got more labs, you've got more, you know,
Meditation rooms.
technology, meditation rooms, yeah, hot tubs, you know, stuff like that.
Is that now
I mean, you
canon
know, the larger
information,
the
Doug?
ship.
Hot tubs on the Surrok class.
Oh yes, there's several decks are hot tubs on the ship, and the bridge is all hot. There's one big hot tub that they all sit in together with a viewing screen on one end. Every time though the turbo lift doors open, the water runs out and they have to refill it.
Do they have candles and stuff, too? Well, they are Vulcans, so they probably have, like, incense and stuff.
Absolutely.
This is a weird
And
ship.
those little sparkly curtains, you know, like Spock had in his quarters and the Rathacon, you know, psychedelic mirrors that have infinity lights in them and stuff like that.
I'm sensing the Vulcans were quite a strange species in your design aesthetic. Hot tubs everywhere.
They should be a strange species. This ship goes on longer missions. You know, it's a ship of the line for the Vulcans. You know, it's not like a survey ship passing through the solar system. You know,
It's the same
the
size as an
equivalent.
Intrepid class, and that's a pretty sizable ship, especially compared to Enterprise era.
Yeah, Yeah, but the Vulcans are, I mean, they're so much more advanced than we are. Well, they're more advanced, but not significant, not that greatly advanced, enough to hold it over us.
Mhm.
Anyway, so weapons included on the ship was particle beam emitters and photon torpedoes, or photon torpedoes, depending on. And it was one of the most advanced ships in the Alpha Quadrant, obviously the
Um,
Vulcans.
Given that this was the first Vulcan ship we saw, how well armed do you envision the Vulcans would be, especially for a warship? Would it be logical to have,
Well, I mean,
this hostility when they should be logical and peaceful?
frankly, to me the idea of Vulcan warship doesn't even sound right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of the Earth Federation having warships either. People love battles and space battles and war and stuff like that. It's a little, you know, you have to have conflict.
Mhm.
And I know that Gene's idea was that we fought when we had to defend ourselves. The Enterprise really was not a warship, but it was prepared to handle itself because there were races out there who were hostile. You had to be, significantly armed, otherwise you could end up dinner.
Well, I think
Yeah.
one big subplot in Enterprise was their conflict with the Andorians, and they're obviously quite a powerful race as well. So I think
Oh yeah.
it's probably logical to at least have technology to rival there in terms of
Oh,
weaponry.
absolutely. They have to protect themselves, and I'm sure the Vulcans are probably hated because they're such smartasses.
How did you then see the Vulcan way of approaching each other on board a starship would be, in your mind at least, when you designed the ship?
Approaching each other.
Well, I mean, you say
Did you say-
Kirk was more like a military commander. How did you see a Vulcan commander approaching his men, say, on the warship or the science ship?
The thing is that I think that humans, although when they're properly trained, can get the job done. That Vulcan training starts, when they're born. I mean, it's almost Spartan in a way.
Mm.
That it doesn't take a hell of a lot of training to get people, to behave in a very regimented way for Vulcans. I think that with humans, it takes more training to do that. I think, Vulcans go and learn the systems and how the ship works and what the chain of command is. But I think that just because of the way they are, that's just their natural state. They don't have to learn that kind of thing like human beings do.
Ship possessed tractor beam technology, which was considered classified from Earth's Starfleet because the Vulcans were kind of assholes way back in the day. Uh, this tractor beam emitter was located on the lower section of the primary hull in front of the warp drive engine. The warp engine was a ring-shaped structure, which is quite advanced when compared to Starfleet's Warp 5 designs.
What other technologies did you envision Vulcans at the time having? Maybe holodecks, replicators? We didn't see much on the screen, but what did you envision when you thought of the Vulcan race at that era anyway?
Well, I mean, I think that they were closer in technology to where Kirk and crew were. That they were, significantly advanced compared to us.
So probably a replicator because they have replicates.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, if you have
That's
transporter technology, you're going to have replicators. I mean, we have transporter technology on the NX, but it's kind of experimental. So,
Could you, could you see them having holodecks or being close? Or is that a bit too far?
yes, I absolutely. I mean, I think that right now we're not that far from having holodecks.
Anyway, so this vessel could also be
That's what they
outfitted
say.
as either a science vessel or a combat cruiser. When outfitted as a science ship, it had a red coloration for its hull and a max speed of warp 6.5. However, when configured as a combat cruiser, it was a copper-coloured hull and had a max speed of warp 7. Another vessel of this class I see on the screen is the Nivar, and in 2152 we can see the larger combat cruiser called the Chiron.
So my question is, given that this is the first red starship we see in the Trek universe, chronologically at least, is there any reason for that per se? Was it painted red, or was it using like red materials? Because I know the Vulcans, their planet is red, and a lot of their.
Well, I mean, at that point, it was done strictly for aesthetic value. I mean, Vulcan is red, the skies are red, everything's red. So.
But their blood is not red.
Yeah, that's right. Their blood isn't red. I mean, I know that a lot of times, especially shows like Enterprise, they tend to mute the colors of everything. You look at the original series and the colors are all very bright. Then you go to Enterprise. I mean, I walked in the room one day and looked at Enterprise on the TV and said, "Oh my God, what's wrong with the television? There's no color." And I was like, oh, it's Enterprise. The color is on. Everything was very monochromatic looking.
Yeah.
And so they pushed back all the bright colors. I made the ship a bright red. I think that the ruddier coloration is fine. I think that they probably felt that the very intense red color, and I think I also had it kind of shiny as well, hurts the scale.
Mhm.
Because when you have something that's really big and you pull back from it, there's aerial perspective and stuff in the air that's going to dull down the color of everything. So the larger something is, the further away you get, the more desaturated colors tend to become.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, if you could theorize though, for a purely technical level, why would the ship be red? Purely technical, just
For a technical reason?
Yeah. Why would Vulcans make a red hull, not paint red hull? What do you think?
Well, it completely changes the profile of the warp bubble. Warp fields are very, very affected by color. They're very sensitive to color.
That's why the Bizarre collectors are red, don't you know?
That's exactly
Science.
right. They found that if they made the whole ship red, the ship was able to slip
Warp 7.
on the warp bubble much easier.
So if Enterprise was red, it would have been Warp 7. Doug confirmed.
And red doesn't look red to Vulcans. Red looks white to Vulcans.
Well, that could make sense, actually.
Their ships are. They think our ships are red, and they smell colors too.
Anyway,
You asked.
we're gonna move on to.
It was purely aesthetic. One of the things I might mention that's interesting is that my idea is that when Trip saw the Surrok, they'd never seen a Vulcan ship before like that. Everything was kept very secret. So when he saw that pretty much blew him away. And Starfleet engineers and stuff started looking at the ring on the ring-based drive, and we even tried it ourselves, which is why we have that ring-based Enterprise.
The Declaration class, yeah.
Yeah, it's because we saw what the Vulcans were doing. I mean, it's like, look, you've seen pictures of the Soviet space shuttle that never flew, right?
Yeah.
It looks just like the American space shuttle, just like it. So we would do that, and that was the reason that in my mind, why we ended up with ring ships. We saw what they were doing, and we gave it a try ourselves. It didn't work out as well for us as the saucer nacelle configuration did.
I've got a little question about the red again, just before Stuart finishes. So do you think the fact that you made a red Vulcan ship, do you think that was the inspiration for the red ship we saw in the JJ universe? The randomly red spaceship?
I have no idea. I haven't a clue.
Do you want to take credit for that, though?
Well, okay. The NX was in the second movie, I hear.
Yes,
on the tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the only ship that survived the reality shift.
Officially, there was a Constitution class hanging up in Admiral Marcus's office, but that scene was cut. So anyway, we're going to move on to behind the scenes now. Because John Eves, the production illustrator, was busy working on Star Trek Nemesis at the time, it fell to our guest star, Doug Drexler, to design the Timur.
Is that what happened? I can't remember.
For Enterprise. Drexler stated...
Hey, that model, hold that up. Hold that closer to the camera. I'm sorry, Stuart.
That's okay.
What really bothers me is that, you see the bottom of the pylon?
Yeah.
That is not supposed to be flat on the bottom.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be shaped like it's kind of it's a cone. It's without a point. It's supposed to extend down just like the ends of the ship do,
really?
But on the bottom, and there's supposed to be a glowing Bussard there. But for some reason, when they rebuilt it at the visual effects house, they decided they didn't like that. So,
it fell to our guest, Doug Drexler, to design the Timur for Enterprise. Drexler stated, coming up with the design was a little bit daunting because in over 600 episodes of Star Trek, the Vulcan ship design was never really established, and it was his task to design the most influential ship design aesthetic of a major race in Star Trek history.
Almost the race, because it's the Vulcans.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for my way of thinking, the three major races on Star Trek were the humans, the Klingons, and the Vulcans. Those were the three most important races, really. And to design I mean, you had the Enterprise and you had the Klingon ship. They're both classic designs, and they're both designed by Matt Jeffries. And the one thing that was important to me that the Vulcan design be significantly its own look. That there's no mistaking it for a Klingon ship. There's no mistaking it for, a Starfleet vessel. Very often, when you're cranking out tons and tons of ships, you have ships of the week. It gets to the point where it's hard to they all look the same at a certain point. There's a certain sameness to the design. They all look like
alien. Yeah.
Yeah, they all look like they came from the same factory.
It's funny because we just talked to Rick Sternbach, and he had designed the one ship that was used about 15 times, just reconfigured.
TNG.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that's especially true on TNG because they had to physically build models.
Yeah.
Physically building a model is much more difficult.
It appeared very early in Enterprise, and that would imply that the producers and directors had envisioned that the Vulcans would definitely appear quite a lot in terms of spaceships. So what sort of direction were you given in terms of design? Did they put any...
I wasn't given any direction at all. No. I was given no direction at all. And I don't remember Herman giving me any direction either. I just went and did what I thought, and I based the three designs on things I had seen that we knew about them already, whether it was costume, some of the shapes you could see in the costumes in The Search for Spock, some of the headpieces and things like that. But I was pretty much just left on my own. The thing was that I really wanted, because I saw the Vulcans as being, I felt that they had to have a ship as distinctive as the Federation and the Klingons, and I also wanted it to be a Matt Jeffries design. I thought that it was fitting that whatever design we had for the Vulcans, that it be designed by the same guy who designed the ships for the other two races that are so distinctive that 50 years later, we're still basing ship designs on them.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because my next point is that you want it to be memorable, and so you based it off of an original Matt Jeffries design for Enterprise, which is obviously, as you say, the ring ship. Very simplistic but distinctive, and not overworked. It was clear and recognisable.
Yeah, Matt had done that design. I know he considered it for the Enterprise, but it was also a possible design for a series that Roddenberry wanted to do called Starship that never happened. And then, of course, it ended up on the rec deck in Star Trek The Motion Picture, and we've managed to put it in episodes all over the place, whether it be a picture on a wall or, it became kind of legendary at a certain point. But, I wanted to get that ring ship design in there. And now the funny thing is that we're seeing articles in science magazines and stuff about possible warp ships that use a ring just like that. And you're like, what, was Matt Jeffries from another planet?
I noticed something, too, about ship design that you might have done subconsciously. I noticed that the Vulcan is very pointed front, back, and at the bottom, like their ears.
Well,
and the Enterprise has a rounded saucer, rounded bazaars,
round heads,
like our rounded ears.
Yeah, our rounded ears. Hey, that actually did. I took every little cue about the Vulcans and used it. When Dorothy saw the Vulcan ship the first time, she said, "Pointy, pointy, anointy, anointy." I remember that's the first thing she said. And so it's pointy, just like it may sound silly, but these are subliminal things that register with people.
And another potential design you had, which I think obviously foreshadows the Great Sphere in craft like Daedalus and Future Pasteur class, which was also inspired off Matt Jeffries' design, called the USS Independence. And that was way back in TOS production as an original concept.
He was delighted, however, when Rick Berman and Brandon Braga greenlit the more exotic design, which he actually preferred.
Yeah, the word came back that Brandon Braga loved it. Herman came back and said, Braga loved it.
That's awesome.
And I was like, wow, thank goodness. Isn't that wonderful? Because we often, listen, you win a few, you lose a few. We tried to get the Botany Bay style ships into that universe, and they wouldn't go for it. They thought it looked like a pencil. So they didn't want it.
One main thing he changed from Jeffrey's concept, however, was to turn it upside down, where the ring appeared to defy gravity instead of looking like it was hanging from the main body of the ship. He felt that it showed that the Vulcans were masters of technology and that the humans just didn't understand yet.
Foolish humans. Yeah, it looked. I thought that everyone's first instinct would be to have it, the other way around. And I thought the idea that it kind of went against that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that looks so much better like that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's alien. Yeah.
I think so. That was my thought anyway.
Anyway, the final CG version for the episode Breaking the Ice was made by you, Doug, but the later version, or the Sarang class, was made by Rob Broshun at Eden FX. So the original Surrok class we saw was actually modelled in just a few days. However, this render was a bit low resolution with very little detail, which is fine because it was so far away and was only used in 1 or 2 quick shots.
It probably wasn't. It probably was It was probably built in a lot less than 2 days because remember, I built 3 ships.
Oh, did you build them all in 3D as well?
Yeah, the other 2 were 3D as well.
Yeah, we have the 3D pictures there too.
But as in models, as in full-on 3D models.
Yeah, but I mean, they're bashed out, literally just bashed out, as just to get something for Herman to take to a production meeting. So, believe me, no time was spent on any of this stuff. It's that's television for you, which I love that. I actually really like it. It's nice to have all the time in the world to work on something, but in a way, I really enjoy the crush. If you don't, you won't last in the business. I'll tell you that.
Pierre Droulet added better detailing and texturing, as well as modifying some of the dimensions. The hull too changed color slightly to a more copper hue. This made it look more textured and more realistic in close-up shots.
So now on to discussion. I definitely like this ship. I think it's one of the more striking designs of Enterprise. It's bold and different, yet still simple and sleek. But I definitely don't envy the challenge you faced, Doug, having to be the one to set the Vulcan space design ethic. I mean, the original. We may have seen some glimpses in the survey ship in First Contact, but we never saw a full ship or even a full cruiser or capital ship. I think the colour palette is very Vulcan, and sleek and simplistic works best, I think. As mentioned earlier, we saw this, and we also saw the Ring Enterprise, and I thought it's a great way of retrospectively designing based on the TOS mindset and be able to fit it into the canon. It fits perfectly in.
Yeah.
It's interesting and definitely one of Enterprise's most iconic designs. Plus, with the warp ring, it definitely feels like a faster ship. I mean, it's a big ship and definitely fits that more advanced aesthetic. I like the large variant, and yeah, it's a cool ship overall.
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased with it. I was pleased with it then, and in retrospect, I'm even more pleased with it because you can't confuse it with anything else, which is what is so wonderful about the Saucer nacelle ships and the Klingon ship. You're not going to mix it up with any other species. I thought that that some of the designs that followed kind of pushed the Vulcan ships back into a standard kind of fuselage with. I mean, John did a nice thing with the ring, but it turned this way, and then you ended up with this cigar shape again, which a lot of ships do. And from a distance, it could be anything. It could be, it could be any ship. I love everything John does, and John is brilliant. He's a dear, dear friend of mine, But I thought that that they pushed away from that very distinctive look that the first one has.
That being said, I love the design of this ship. Dare I say that it's logical? It was definitely made with to make the human tech look very primitive by comparison. And the choice of the color palette was genius to differentiate it from anyone else.
Just so red.
You got the greens for the Romulans. You got the reds for the Vulcans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that I knew that Star Trek, especially where Mike Okuda is involved, he was always very aware of. If you look at the interfaces on the ships, Mike always kept very distinct color palettes for the interfaces. The Federation interface, the Romulans used lots of greens and blues, and the Klingons were reds and yellows. Yeah. So it was like, if you look at a lot of readouts and things on spaceships for other shows, or even the movies possibly, they go hog wild, and they've got every color under the sun in the readouts. And ultimately, we always felt, and I know Mike feels this way, ultimately you end up with kind of a muddy look. Mike had this idea about keeping the color palette very simple to like 3 or 4. And then not only would it be clean and crisp and distinct, but you would also have a racial identity to the looks that people would recognize instantly. When you have a color palette that goes crazy, you've lost your racial identity.
And I think you've got to point out you won't have to change the bulbs as much if there's just 3 primary colours.
Good point.
There was a
good
funny
point.
red dwarf like that.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
you remember that?
Yes.
Yes.
One of the best
It does
one-liners.
mean changing the bulb, sir. It's classic.
The advanced warp ring was very interesting, as just recently a warp concept ship was designed by NASA called the IXS Enterprise, a definite tip of the hat to Matt Jeffries, whose insight into design is clearly shown in the design of the ship, which may one day take us to distant stars. Perhaps Gary Seven influenced Matt Jeffries and got these designs into Star Trek to lead us down the path we were meant to wander.
It could be. It could be. We'll have to do a show on the World's Fair sometime, so we could, because that was a huge influence on the design ethic of Star Trek.
So, obviously, we always try and pick something we don't like about the ship. And I like the design, but I've got to bring up one thing. How could it land? Now, I have 2 ideas. So maybe, and I've actually got the physical one, so maybe the entire ship would just go down like this and then sort of get taken in some moorings. Or what if the ring, the internal part of the ship, comes out and then lands again in specific moorings? So, I mean, the ship's got to land, hasn't it?
No, it doesn't.
But what?
The Enterprise doesn't land.
The Enterprise,
It
you
can,
know, I
I'm
hate
sure.
it. I hate it. No,
No, the saucer section can in an emergency.
I hated it when they started landing the ships. I hated that. I was what I always loved about, you know, the thing was when Star Trek came around, the idea of a ship that didn't land was revolutionary. No one did that. No one ever heard of it. All the flying saucers and all the silver rocket ships, they all land. What do you mean it doesn't land? And it was a revolutionary idea that the Enterprise was a creature of space. I love that. That's what entering the atmosphere was dangerous. You know, they you know, now they fly them in over in Manhattan Island. You know, Enterprise flies in over Manhattan. I just, you know,
Yeah.
they decided they had to do that, and so we put landing legs on stuff, and you know, I just don't. I never envisioned the Vulcan ship as landing. What for? You know, there's no real reason for it.
You got shuttles. For
Although
that
I like
reason,
the
haven't you?
idea of maybe it comes down and that it mates into a ring.
Yeah.
You know, that the long piece fits right in, and then you've just got this shape, pointed shape. You know, like the Vulcan buildings. You know, but I never saw it as landing.
Okay.
And I never saw the NX as landing, and I never even saw it entering the atmosphere like they made it enter the atmosphere.
I mean, this is a big ship. You can see it having some serious troubles, especially with the turbulence you'd have with a ring. I can imagine it being quite a, you know.
Well, the thing is this: when you talk about turbulence and the ship and stuff like that, I always thought that, and they should have said it on a show or when Voyager first did their blue sky, whatever it was, thing landing. And I remember when I did the cross section, Mike came to me and said, "You got to put landing gear in." I'm like, "What? The ship lands? You're kidding." I have to admit, it looks pretty silly when it's landed with those little tiny legs and it's so nose heavy. But, you know, the thing is that you should be able to rig your deflector screens to act as airfoils and create any aerodynamic shape you want around the ship. So the fact that it may not look aerodynamic doesn't mean anything. You can create an aerodynamic flight surface using force fields.
Would it be possible by that logic to also create landing gear using your tractor beam?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's cool.
I mean, they decided that they had so much power that they could, you know, land a massive ship like that. You know, I mean, I will say that, okay, maybe when we're getting into that, you know, Picard era that they're able to do that, or the Voyager era they're able to do that. But I don't believe that they were able to do it in the TOS era, and I certainly don't think they were able to do it in the NX era.
All right, so it's that time of the show. We move on to verses. Now it's time for a special verses because we have Doug Drexler with us. So we'll be, in fact, doing 2 verses where we each pick a ship that we think can go toe-to-toe with the Surrok class. And, well, Doug be the judge.
Okay, let's start off by saying Captain Cockins is Captain Foley. Captain Foley is Captain Cockins. We're going to flip the coin and see who goes first.
Hey, he's only a commander, Doug.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's my second in command.
Why is that?
But I have more technical experience, you know, warp engines, weapons. I mean, you have command, but okay, ready? So, for the first verses, I'm going to get the Surrok class, but what are you going to go against this majestic Vulcan ship?
I'm going to take, how about an Axanar D7? So the brand new, straight off the line D7s.
Okay, so my ship's a bit old at this point, but technology, Vulcans were heavily advanced. Okay, so who should go first?
I'll let you go first. Let's see. Okay. Let's say I'm just I'm just finished being built in the dry dock, and you come up and start your.
Well, I mean, I think that the Klingons are probably more well armed and they're more
Well,
vicious.
yeah, but I mean,
However, the Vulcans are smarter than the Klingons are. And they're going to outsmart them. There's no, the Vulcans are so run. The Klingons are so run by their emotions, and they're so hot-headed.
That's all.
They're going to mess up.
That's all it takes to be a good captain, though, is just being more clever.
Yes, but my ship is a ginormous beast with the powerful emitters that have, class whatever, 12, 15 phase beams, torpedoes. That outclass you, despite it being a bit newer. We've got the strongest beams of the era. I mean, I'm going to come in, warp in, start firing.
It didn't help the United States in Vietnam.
But I'm a Vulcan. I'm logical. I have pre-thought this battle. I know the outcome. I'm gonna, warp in 5 phases across your shields. I'm gonna break through focus to maybe take out that spindly little bit between your hull and your, command deck. Rip straight through suddenly. Oh dear, 5 few torpedoes, and I'm just gonna, go in the hot tub.
Did you Did you forget that I'm in dry dock though? You got to shoot through the dry dock before you can do that.
Oh, you mean you're so scared that you're a patak to stay in the dry dock, are you?
Oh,
face me in open battle.
Well, as per Star Trek Generations, my torpedoes and stuff don't show up till Tuesday, so I'm just hanging out in dry dock. No.
Wait, who's the Vulcan? You are.
I'm the Surrok.
Samuel is.
Pointing over. Samuel's the Vulcan. I think the Vulcans would win. It just. They're smarter. They're 2 steps ahead of the Klingons. Always 2 steps ahead of the Klingons.
And if I was a Vulcan ship of the era, I mean, we're going to far outstretch in technology, aren't we? But
I don't even have anything to say to this.
Of course, try and beat the Vulcan Surrok Mark III.
It's a brand new D7, so we just
Klingons are too hot-blooded.
Yeah,
you've seen a Worf. He gets out of control sometimes. I mean, the Vulcans have to win. They're just smarter. They're just.
But let's Stuart give his
They're in
argument.
control of their emotions.
As the Klingon captain, let's just say I say fire torpedoes. But since it's a brand new ship, we have a malfunction. So I just end up whipping my batleth at the view screen, and it cracks. And I thought I won, and then all of a sudden you got.
Oh, you punctured the hull of the bridge, and you got sucked out into space with your batleth.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that the Vulcans take control of the Klingons' torpedoes and turn them around. Onto the Klingon ships, and the Klingons just stand there looking like you're looking now, like they're so shocked they can't even believe it.
Okay.
Vulcan power.
They're smart. Vulcans are smart.
Although
just like the Packlids.
How did the Klingons ever get into space? They're so.
I know. I've wondered that myself, but that's a different discussion for another day.
Well, I've got to say,
they must have stolen the technology from other people.
Well, Stuart, at the end of the day, though, you are a warship, and the Vulcans were not a war species. And this D7 was specifically designed to take on the Ares. The Ares class has Vulcan technology inside it, so we know the Vulcans aren't leaps and bounds ahead necessarily. While weapons might not be up to scratch, I'm sure the Klingons have prepared themselves. Because remember, the Vulcans are part of the Federation as well, so there's going to have ships around. So I think you're going to have more powerful torpedoes than me. I think you're going to try and leapfrog that. So I think I'm a bigger ship. I can't maneuver around you. I think you can probably outmaneuver me. So I think if you've got a few good pot shots in, you could do some pretty serious damage. I think Doug's right, but I think get a few good attacks.
Here's what I would do. I would fly between your ring, between your ship and the ring. I would fire phasers at your ring, lock on a tractor beam to the piece that I just damaged. Rip it off, and use the tractor beam to throw it into your ship.
Well, I mean, your ship's 350 and the D7's, 220? So you're pretty much the same size, Stuart. You'd hit the ship. Sorry. I have a D7 here. Do you want to see the comparison?
I think that the D7 gets stuck in the ring.
No, but then he'd just self-destruct. He'd self-destruct. He'd blow me up.
There you
go.
It's
kind of like a peanut butter cup, You got chocolate on my peanut butter. You got peanut butter on my chocolate.
Klingons.
They lived happily ever after.
I sense it's going to be quite a hard round too. I'm going to, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who won that one. Doug, I don't even know what to say.
Doug, give us an answer. Who won that?
Well, I just happen to think that the Vulcans, first of all, just because they're not warlike now, they used to be extremely warlike. They've managed to, smooth that over, but I think that they may even be more horrific than the Klingons ever were at their worst. Could be.
And the logic will make them very they have the Romulan aggressiveness, but with the logic, they can actually apply that surgically. And yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even in hand-to-hand combat, the Klingons may look more brutish and more like cavemen, but I think the Vulcans would make short work of Klingons in a hand-to-hand fight. I mean, Vulcans are like 3 or 4 times stronger than a human being. Yeah. You know, it's like a chimpanzee.
So I think I win this one. Thank you, Doug. But now I've got to go against. I think so. But now I've got to go against the Surrok. So I've got to vow versus. Now this is. I'm the Surrok. Oh wait, so you're the Surrok. No.
Now I get the Surrok. Okay. And what do you take? What do you take?
Now we're taking this as Enterprise Zero Surrok, aren't we, Stuart?
Yeah.
So more technology than the average NX. So what I'm going to be. Sorry, Doug. I'm the NX refit. 2 of your babies versus. It had to happen at some point. Federation versus Romulan. Something has happened. Romulan said Romulan versus Vulcan.
I think the Surrok would probably be in trouble.
Doug, let's fight first, and then you can do your thing. So, NX obviously not so much a match for the Surrok by quite a lot, but the refit, bigger, stronger, faster warp, maybe even a technological match for that of the era. I'm sure I've got full-on photon torpedoes, not just photonic phasers. Pretty powerful. If I could warp in, start firing. I'm not as big, but it means I'm more maneuverable. And I don't think the Vulcans, with this sort of design are very maneuverable. Fire a few phasers, launch a few torpedoes, zoom around, dodge. I mean, I've got quite a good profile. And, probably get through your shields, do a few critical hits. Yes, I'm probably going to say that your shields are going to be far better than mine, so you're probably going to rip through mine. But, I think I'll get some good shots in. So I think I've got a good chance in this one. Stuart, what can you do?
Well, so what I'm going to say is, I'm a Vulcan, logical. I saw you coming. I warped out of here. I'm gone already. You're firing at nothing right now.
You ran away?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's logical.
So the first one ever, Sam wins both.
Makes sense.
Well, we don't really know exactly what the Surrok had weapon-wise. So, Doug, what do you think we had weapon-wise?
Well, see, I think that the Surrok might be in trouble. I think that that the Vulcans, especially these Vulcans, tend to be a little bit full of themselves, a little overconfident. For the first time, we are finally out into the universe, and we are learning stuff all over the place. Plus, we've probably been spying on them quite a bit. I think that I think that the Starfleet has probably been preparing for an altercation with the Vulcans all along, although everyone's hoping that it never happens. I think that the NX refit wasn't just designed with the idea of dealing with the Klingons and the Romulans and the Andorians, which is some pretty major threatage going on there, but they also figured the Vulcans in here. I think they had to. So I think that we learned an awful lot in a very short period of time, and probably felt more pressed to learn and develop than they did, because they've been tooling around the galaxy as it is, feeling pretty good about themselves. So I think that everybody was taken by surprise by the NX refit.
So you think it's about a match, or do you think slightly superior in terms of firepower? If you had to say.
I think that the NX refit was designed to outgun the Surrok. I think it was designed to not just go toe-to-toe, but try to have an edge on everybody that they could by the time that refit came along.
And obviously a good captain like Jonathan Archer, I'm sure he could, pull a few good moves out to beat the Surrok as well. So I think that's 2 to me. Awesome. First versus for 2. Let's see if you can do as well next time, Stuart. But, it's me. So
that is it for this episode of Trekyards. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Doug Drexler, for joining us again. It was great having you on. We learned lots of cool stuff, as I'm sure everyone did. And once again, check out trekyards.com, join the Facebook page and group. There's going to be exclusive videos and whatnot on the group as well, so check that out. And this is us signing off for today. Captain Foley saying goodbye.
Simon Cockins.
As always, Doug Drexler.
All right. Bye, guys.